it's now.
That's what it is. I thought
nice.
people will spell it wrong. I didn't know what that meant.
Right.
Yes, goodness.
That's what it is. Don't worry, I learned about it yesterday too. So
well, we're live, ladies. I can see my face somewhere coming up.
That's nice. I like that concept.
Yeah. Valentine. So, hi, people. Hello, how are you? I can see that we're live on Facebook. Belinda and I are wearing red, and we were just discussing what that meant. Yesterday was Belinda, explain it to us what that meant, because I didn't know anything about that. I thought people were spelling it wrong. Valentines and Galentines. Belinda, tell them what it means.
Yeah, they're being cheeky. Say that again. Can you hear me? So what Galentine's means? What I feel learning today, is it something about celebrating girl friendships then? Is it about celebrating female friendship and the love we have with each other?
Yes.
Well,
so that was yesterday.
Really nice. Isn't that a nice thing? Because we sometimes, there are different types of love, right? And so different types of love means that you can celebrate the friendship of a woman or an older friend. Like, for example, the lady upstairs that I've been singing about, she's 90 years old. She was on Friday, and she's a really nice person, a nice friend. So why should I not celebrate her, especially on her 90th birthday? I did put pictures and I took her to lunch. So hey, so happy, I'll have to say happy Valentine, Miss Ray. And you guys out there,
happy Valentine's. Lovely.
Yeah, how are you celebrating Valentine? Oh, are you celebrating Valentine's today? I'm talking to all the people on our Facebook Live, the ones that come in every week and support us. Are you celebrating it? I'm not sure about it this year. I think it's just, I don't know if it's because I'm getting older, but I think that Valentine should be every day. Why? It could be every weekend as far as I'm concerned. My partner should know to say I love you any day, anytime, any place. And so why? Because I think people are actually forgetting what Valentine was about. And isn't it a young people's thing? Maybe it's me, but it was a way of young people being able to express to, especially men, to a girl that I love you. But now everybody's taking it over, confused. Am I not right?
It's true.
Not. Maybe not.
I mean, I'm getting older, but I still appreciate Valentine's Day.
All right. It's just me being an old fuddy-duddy. Less of the old.
I look at Valentine's in the way Sherry looks at it, in the sense that, yes, you should hopefully be able to share and give and receive love every day, especially if you're in a relationship, or even, like we're talking about mother-daughter relationships. Every year I go and I hug my mother and I tell her Happy Mother's Day. And years before, when I was a teenager, I used to bake her cakes and give her cards and stuff. So she was my original Valentine. So I think that it should be an everyday thing. Just like I always tell people, mental health awareness for me as a psychologist, I'm sure Belinda is the same thing as well. Every day is Mental Health Day awareness.
Yeah. So we said it. But it doesn't mean that if you're planning to pop by with flowers, roses, or wine, that I'm going to stop you. I accept anything that you bring to me today, okay? And, I was just saying to Raza, I'm happy today. Some days it's just, in the week was just too many things. Have you ever felt overburdened with people asking you to do things? I actually think that this lockdown is driving me mad, because people get to you online and they give you work. They want a conversation, and next I hear it coming, can. And as soon as they say that, it's almost like I'm getting a nervous twitch. Everybody wants you to do something. So please save the asking until next week. But this is just us being simple. I'm just trying to maybe lighten the mood before we get on to the topic, which we started last week. Both Belinda and Raza, we started talking while I was away, and the wind was blowing everything away and cutting me off. This time we've come back and I'm in a stable place. And I really wanted to talk about what we started last week, mothers and daughters who don't get on. And it's more so the mothers who really don't like the daughters. And I just couldn't understand it, because for me, every mother should like their daughter. I think you should like any child that you've had to go through hours of pain and your muscles stretching and all those things, and then you're going to say you don't like them. But that was being quite fickle. There's a lot of people who apparently don't like their daughters, and when we did the show last week, lots of people came in. So I have some people in the room that's waiting for us to talk. Roxana Braithwaite, who's my sister. Hello, darling sister. Emmanuel Bollas, hello. Nakazi Ruth, happy Valentine's to you, Sherry, and the panel. So, hey, if you all ain't got one Valentine message, you got them here. Happy Valentine, ladies. Sandra Thomas. Let's talk about mothers and their daughters. So one of the things, and I'm just going into the things that came up last week, and one of them was excessive love, which was just really weird. Excessive love? Who gets excessive love? But this girl has written that her mother basically comes over as if she loves her so much that she doesn't allow her to breathe. She doesn't allow her to have a relationship. Everything that she talks about is me, 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 what happened to her, being the mother, and she doesn't allow her daughter to have a relationship of her own. I'm praising this because obviously we can't do them all, but in that sense that they fight a lot. But that's because the mother is saying, I'm trying to save you from what I've gone through, and you shouldn't go out with him because you don't know his family. You shouldn't do this because their family are not educated. You shouldn't do this. So I wanted to pick up on that one. So can we start with that one? How can you help? Maybe this week we can talk about how can we help the people who have these issues. Raza.
Right. Thanks, Sherry. So what we were discussing when this case came up was that, those are some characteristics of what we would deem like a helicopter mother. But now as you explain the dynamics a little bit better, it's a little bit more than helicopter. Like, okay, helicopter mother is the byproduct of what sounds like potentially unresolved trauma. So her own unresolved hurt, her own unresolved issues with her past, with relationships, and by having them unresolved, she's projecting them onto her daughter. And that in itself takes away a lot of the daughter's sense of independence, sense of power, sense of control. She may be feeling very powerless, very without an identity, because her mother's, like you said, vicariously, kind of living through her daughter. But I think it's not just alone vicariously living through her daughter, but her own mental health. And I spoke about this last week where I said, like, your own mother's mental health can impact your relationship. I think her own anxiety about her life or about life in general. I don't think she trusts people. I don't think she trusts her daughter to make a good decision either, which is unfortunate, because I always say I never get, but I get it. Like, why people could bad talk or think so low of the people that they raised. like, you know, looking at your child as like a villain, when it's like, didn't you teach your child to be however they are? You know, even if the child is not bad, why could you, you know, why do you look at your child as if they're hopeless and cruel and unstable and incapable of making decisions? Like, do you know, if you taught your child, you know, how to be a developed adult who can make decisions and stuff like that? So when I'm listening to that, I'm thinking, you know, there needs to be, when we talk about what to do, I definitely think that there needs to be a discussion with the mother, especially if this person's an adult, to say like, look, I think that there have been years where you have underestimated my capacity as an adult to make decisions. And I feel like because of that, I lost out on building my identity. Because if every time you try to take a step, your mother says stop, how far can you really go in development wise, right? In developing your identity and your self-esteem. And if we go back to Erik Erikson, and we talk about those developmental stages, and these psychological heads out there, Belinda, you might appreciate this. You know, we talk about that second stage. Being autonomy.
Phone on. You need to turn your phone off.
We talk about that maybe it's Belinda. Yeah, sorry about that. I just heard the feedback. Right. So in the sense of that second stage of Erik Erikson talks about autonomy. And if we don't develop autonomy, what happens as a result? And in Guyana, I feel like sometimes it's, again, I always say Guyana is a split down the middle, two sides, in the sense of you're either going to have very sheltered children where parents protect and hover and so on, or you're going to have parents who don't have either the time or the knowledge of how to approach protecting their children, and they drop the children off here, there, they let them lie on the street. They don't have a babysitter to watch them. They have the 10-year-old watching the 6-year-old and stuff like that. So all of these things can be a result of whatever the mother went through and projecting onto the child and now the adult. And that makes it very hard for the adult to know whether she's making good choices. And that creates a lot of self-doubt within themselves. I'm going to stop there for now. Go, Belinda.
Belinda, what's your take on that question?
I agree. I do agree. But I suppose for me, I'm thinking, can you hear me?
Can now, yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, sorry. So I don't know if I'll sit closer so you can hear me. I do agree. I think in regards to finding ways to cope, I think what can be really difficult is even having an attitude of compassion towards your mother. I think can sometimes make it always the best, not always easy, but it makes it easier. Because I think sometimes it's about recognizing that even though it might seem like your mum doesn't deserve it, she does also need some compassion and some empathy. And that I think will make it easier sometimes just to be able to kind of get a sense of understanding, and then maybe you kind of have those. I think what's going to happen is when just got a need and they just want their need met, sometimes people are not necessarily listening. You don't necessarily come to the conversation to listen. So I would say having the mindset of, okay, if you do want the relationship to work effectively, it's about kind of maybe having some sort of compassion towards your parent and looking at, okay, let me empathize with them and the things that they've been through and why this might be an issue for them moving forward.
Actually, what you said, it came through quite clearly last week. One lady said that it took her years of fighting with her mother on different things, but never did she look at things from her mother's point of view. You know, it's only when it got really bad, and I think her mom had a breakdown, or there was a breakdown in the relationship, that she started to look at it from her mother's point of view, and that's what helped her to heal or let her understand her mother. So that, in conclusion, that's what you're saying. Both of you are saying the same thing, basically, you know, look at things perhaps from a mother's point of view and have the conversation with your mother to say, this is not working for me. I think that's the thing. You have to have a conversation, right? You have to have the conversation.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, if it's safe to, would you say, Reza? Because sometimes it isn't actually safe to have the conversation, but if it's safe to have the conversation, and when I say safe, I'm talking about emotionally safe for you, because sometimes we can have these conversations, but then put ourselves in harm's way, as it were.
Right.
But if it's safe to, absolutely have the conversation, and definitely go in with the mind to understand.
Okay.
And I think like the good people tend to be like, okay, well, Raisa, how do we know that it's emotionally safe to have this kind of conversation? I feel like if you have tried to have this conversation with whomever, it doesn't have to be a mother. I mean, having really serious emotional conversations with whether it be a sibling or a partner. And if you find that it always ends in something larger or worse, or it ends in some kind of verbal belittling and so on, I don't know if that would be considered safe. You know, and that's why I kind of always give persons a few options of how to proceed. One definitely is having that conversation. I always tell people we have two options. Either have the conversation, as painful it might be, or you suffer in silence by not having the conversation or not being able to. But then if that's the case, I always give them other options whereby boundaries, setting boundaries, emotional boundaries, time boundaries with persons, and knowing when to like cut off a conversation that's going to go really badly is important for people's mental health. To say, if you're going to speak to me like that, I just can't talk to you, or I just can't engage with you. And until we can have a calm conversation, I'm just going to remove myself from this conversation, whether it's via phone, text, or even physically in a room. You know, kind of letting them know, like, I came to have a really genuine, calm conversation. And if this is going to go south, then don't bother. Right?
Well, it's really nice that you said that, but I'm thinking about Caribbean parents. I'm saying Caribbean, but obviously I know on this thread we have African, Asian. So just about people who are more dominant, parents who are more domineering, then I should say. And it's not that easy to have that kind of conversation with them. It ends up with a big views out and a big argument. So sometimes that can be, God, I haven't used that word views out for a long time, but that could actually turn around to be quite intimidating, having to deal with a person like that who takes everything personal when all you want to do is say, let me have my life. So you really have to be quite strong in what you're saying. And if those people who are listening in the room, in the Facebook Live, if you have a comment, please say it and I'm going to read it out, because this conversation is about us and you, and being able to learning how to express ourselves, not even just in love with the issues with a parent, but just in general, right? Right, Raza? Right, Belinda?
Yes.
So
I think we definitely, you know, we picked this Sunday in particular because we definitely wanted to also explore like how these relationships can come to impact, like these relationships with your mother or even your parents in general come to impact like actual adult relationships. And people will come to me and be like, my partner doesn't know how to communicate, they're aggressive, they're overly sensitive or sensitive to anything that seems like rejection, and they're always ready to like abandon ship as soon as like things get wrong or too rough. And so I think like all of those things have to do with A, how you were raised, B, what kind of relationships you saw growing up, and 3, you know, the people who were supposed to, you know, show you unconditional love may not have been able to show you that. And I have clients, I had this great conversation with one of my clients the other day, and they were like saying, what's the difference between a condition and a boundary? And so we were talking about, if you get upset with your partner for argument and you decide they want sex, but you don't want sex, to have sex. Is it a condition if you say, if you piss me off, you don't get sex? Or is it boundaries by saying, I will not give my body up, or I will not feel enthusiastic about having sex if I'm still upset at you? And I feel like it's like the chicken or the egg. Maybe we developed that boundary and the condition was created, or the condition was there before, and the boundary is the wall itself that creates that condition. I don't know if I'm explaining it properly, but how they explain that was.
But is that not okay? It's like I see that as when women and men are together, and then the father upsets the mother, and then she takes away the child. It's like the that thing that
Punishment.
the punishment. So is sex not indirectly the same thing? When you say, well, it's my body and you're not coming here because we had a row about, did I put enough salt in the food? So I'm just making it up. But isn't that the same thing, Belinda?
Yes, it can be. No, it can be. I definitely can be the same thing. I think I was saying to someone the other day that from young, I was very, I say young, but secondary school age, I kind of started to learn really quickly going to a mixed school how I could use my sexuality on some level to kind of control certain situations. Something I learned very quickly. So absolutely it can be used against. But can I also say, though, that it can also be around boundaries, because if you don't feel safe emotionally with your partner, then you then have an impact on whether you feel safe physically. Do you know what I mean? So I think sometimes I hear what you're saying in regards to the line and how thin it can be between conditions and boundaries. But what we're talking about is then the impact to your relationship with your parents, with your mum, let's say, because that's what we're talking about, right? And sometimes I think we underestimate the impact the mother and daughter relationship has with them on the relationships. We more say about your daughters and fathers, don't we? We always look at, that's the first man that you love and he's supposed to teach you how to be in a relationship. But the relationship with you and your mum is just as important, because she also teaches you about being a woman, right? And what then tends to happen is a lot of us become mothers before we become women. So we go into relationships and we become mothers quite quickly sometimes. But we don't necessarily know who we are as women, because if that relationship is fragmented between you and your mum, you might not be as self-aware as you should be. You might not have been in touch with your esteem as you in regards to, your confidence and your esteem. You might not be in touch with who you are in regards to what you like and what you don't like, because something, as I said earlier, around you're learning from the relationship you have with your mum about what's good, what's bad, what you're allowed to do, because that relationship has conditions. It's not unconditional. So it shapes you and molds you. Who you are today as a woman might not actually really be who you are at all. It's just who you became. Right? Yeah. And I've got this thing around that situation where I say with women, a lot of us, we've become someone. And so when a woman comes to me for therapy, especially in regards to relationships and regards to whether it's relationships with a partner or what have you, I say the issue isn't really about who we become. Therapy is important because it allows you to unbecome. Right. And when you then unbecome all that you became, then you can navigate through these relationships authentically, because like we're saying, if you've got issues with your mum and your mum has issues with you, if that primary relationship is fragmented, you then get trust issues. You might need reassurance and validation all the time. You might have a fear of abandonment. There's there might be some power imbalances, like you're saying, Sherry Ann, in regards to the relationship. You might have poor communication. You might have negative self-esteem. We underestimate how that relationship can set us up as women. And then when we enter into relationships, we're not all that we're supposed to be, right? And we end up loving from a wounded place and an unresolved place. And then issues arise in your relationships from there.
That is so true. And you said something that I was discussing with one of my sisters. I can't remember which one, because there's two of them that I discussed with. And I think that point came up about people sometimes, some women, especially in the Caribbean and in Africa, might be India as well. We bring up our sisters. You know, if you're the eldest one, sometimes you end up being a mother for the mother. Do you know what I mean? She lays a lot of that, those issues or her issues onto you. So invariably, she's still fighting with the father, but the big sister is taking up her slack, and she becomes a woman before she can even continue being a child. So sometimes that's the reason. Those are the issues that people have. Do you get what I'm saying here?
Yeah, but I suppose what I'm saying, Sherry Ann, is she doesn't actually become a woman. She becomes a mother before she becomes.
She's not a woman.
So I'm saying, just not a woman. You see what I'm saying? So a lot of us become mothers.
From like
and when I'm saying about mothers, like you said, that caring. Yes, absolutely. So we become very caring and nurturing in regards to what we think mothering is about. Some of us become mothers and we have that thing about, I'm not going to be like my mom and I'm going to do. We learn to take care of, you know, others, but not necessarily ourselves. And the truth is, a lot of our mothers became mothers before they even knew who they were as women. And so what you're finding right now is that a lot of us are still, as you probably get this, I say that I get clients in the room now who could be 50, but I think I said this last week. I know I'm not really dealing with a 50-year-old in that room. I know I'm still dealing with a 16-year-old. I'm still dealing with a 12-year-old. That's who shows up in the room. That's who's showing up at work. That's who's showing up in the relationships. That's who's showing up as a mum. So I think it's around understanding that these relationships are key in regards to who we then become as women.
Okay, I get.
And I think, Sherry, after the last session, we had spoken. I remember what you're describing is what I described as a parentified child. And I said, I don't know if I said in the last session that how the parentified child is going to have impacts on their relationship with their mother, their relationship with their siblings, because all of a sudden you're no longer my big sister, you're my second mother. And that could have both a negative and a positive outcome, because now if you're the disciplinarian and all of a sudden, why is my sister giving me licks or why is my sister punishing me, that can disrupt that relationship too between siblings. And also, and I talked about this in a video I did literally a couple, like about 2-3 weeks ago, about like oversharing from mothers and parents in general with their children. And I spoke about how that oversharing and, like Belinda said, like burdens, emotional burdens. A 14-year-old does not know how to deal with adult problems. They just will not. Their brain is not developed. They have not had the exposure, the appropriate exposure. And how can you expect a 14-year-old girl or even son to be able to carry the burdens of trauma and abuse and toxic marriages and such, you know, substance abuse? Like, we can't expect that. And so you then end up carrying burdens for your mother. The roles become switched. Your mother becomes the child and you become the mother.
That's
which
true.
has an impact on your identity as you continue growing.
Yes.
So much food for thought. Let me take some questions, right? Roxana Braithwaite says, is there a difference between a toxic mother and a bad mother? Is it possible that I may think my mother is bad because I'm comparing her with my friend's mother, not knowing she's really good? Anybody take that one? Anyone?
I feel like, I mean, I'm always wary of when people use certain adjectives. If that was a client sitting in front of me, I'd be like, okay, bad. What do you consider bad? What are these actions that you are considering bad? Why the word bad? Choice of words, you know, it could have been disappointing, confusing, overwhelming, so many other adjectives, you know. I would have to look at that. Is it natural for people to compare? Of course. I find that most people compare a lot of things in life, their bodies to other people, their jobs to their siblings, their relationships with other partners and the partner's exes. It's pretty natural, but I feel like if it is that, there are things that are missing. Really, I think when people say bad, I think they're talking about certain things are missing from that relationship or how they would like their mother to be. then maybe that needs to be explored on, you know, what is it that makes your mother bad? You know, and did you think she was bad before you met this friend's mom? You know, like that's a good question too. You know, like what was your standard of the relationship before you interacted? Because a lot of people are like, especially in Guyana, they're like, well, my mother wasn't bad, but she wasn't the best, or she wasn't good at X or good at Y, or I felt really not supported or validated in this thing. But I always ask them, you know, like, did you always know that? Did you always feel that? And sometimes they'll be like, yeah, I already knew that before I even compared it with my classmates, you know. So people sometimes are very well aware that those feelings are genuine.
You know what I'm actually thinking, ladies and gentlemen that's in the room? If you'd like to come into the Zoom room, inbox me in Messenger, and I'll send you the link. And I think then you can ask your own questions, because I think many of us here have questions, and the ladies here are superb. So, you know, I'm sure a few of them coming in won't rock your boat, will it, Raza and Belinda? So come in. Send me a message.
That's a good idea.
Send me a message. Floyd Scott says, that's a man in the room. There's two at the moment. Floyd Scott says, wonderful conversation and topic on relationship between mother and children. Is there a template? Note there are expectations of both parties. However, parents need not to drive children to disgust or anger. Teach our children to love. And that is such a relative point. I mean, I'll read it again because I'm sure I didn't read it properly. Wonderful conversation and topic on relationship between mother and children. Is there a template? Question mark. Note, there are expectations of both parties. However, parents need not to drive children to disgust or anger. Teach our children to love. But how do you do that? How do you teach them to love when you haven't been taught yourself? Just think about that. Some parents haven't been taught to love, so that's another point here. Angela Barrow says, my goodness, the relationship with mothers have massive impact on sense of self and relationship in all spheres. Monique Francois says, loving this show so far. Therapy is about on becoming. I like that. Then there, Dancy Black says, oh yes, that was me bringing up three of them, meaning three of her sisters and brothers. Jan Hogan says, I think many moms just doing their best they can with the tools at their disposal. My mom had a temper, but she just wanted us kids to be happy. We all knew we were loved, and I'd give anything to have her here today to say thank you. She was like a Rottweiler, keeping her pups safe and put us before anyone, even our fathers. I know that has impacted the way that I am, and I honor and thank her. I wish more people could have had a mom like mine, and I send all my love today of all days, you know, love Valentine, but she was not perfect. As I know, I am not a perfect mom. I inherited a temper, but I'm working on it. It's all fear-based, right? So I've read some of that. Has anybody said that they want to come in the room? Why are you all so frightened, huh? I'm looking, I'm looking to see. Anyway, nobody has so far. Let's talk about the next area that came up last week. Obviously, I think we need to touch on how it impacts adult romance, adult relationship. Right. Let's talk about that. Raza, do you want to start?
Right. Well, Belinda said it really quite beautifully. I don't know if she heard me chirping in saying, oh, perfect, right? Because she lays out quite thoroughly the reality of the situation. If it is that you have this broken, problematic, potentially unstable relationship with your mother, the person who, like Sherry said, carried you, went through all this pain, it can be very hard to trust people. If it is that relationship, if it is that she is not showing you the love that you are hoping, whether you've seen it in the movies or it's a genuine feeling inside of missing something, right? So we tend to have the fear of people will not love me, my own mother won't love me. I heard people say that to me before. If my own mother could show me how to love, then how do I, A, and Sherry asked it, how do I know how to love or receive love? And B, why would I expect anyone else to love if my own parents couldn't love me or show me that love? And I think Sherry's kind of started to talk about that just now, whereby she said how, and I said this last week, if certain guidance on how to demonstrate love, whether it's affection or emotional love or psychological support, was not taught to our mothers, then it's hard for them to teach us. And so forth and so forth. And that's how that intergenerational trauma continues, right? Because of that lack of guidance. And so we tend to have sometimes issues with rejection, and we become sensitive to that. And we have issues with attachment. We either become, and you guys can look at avoidantly attached or anxiously attached. And sometimes when there's a really great book, which I don't have on me right now. It's called the Attachment Theory Workbook, and it has great work in there. I can put it on my page if you guys want. And it talks about like even the relationships between like how a relationship works when you have an avoidantly attached person and an anxiously attached person come together, and the very interesting dynamics within that. And so, Belinda continued by saying, our identities, we sometimes become people pleasers because we want our mothers to show us. Remember that conditional, unconditional thing going on? And like the young man said, there's expectations on both sides. So I, as a 14-year-old or 12-year-old, I know I have to do X to get Y. And so I kind of just keep doing that. And I realize, like Linda realized, oh, I have this power. It's called being a woman, and high five. And so she, we then realize, oh, if I want to get certain things, love, affection, validation, support, emotional, whatever, I then have to do X, Y, or Z. And you then become a people pleaser. I've had many clients who tend to dislike not being able to say no. Dislike, sorry guys, please. Yes, dislike not being able to stand up for themselves or be able to pick dinner or where they go or where they're shopping for groceries or have an opinion. And so a lot of that is built into our identity and self-esteem, right? Can you put down your foot? Can you have an opinion without feeling like you're going to inconvenience people? And this is not just in a relationship, but even like in a group of friends. Maybe you sit really silently all the time because you're scared of, well, if I have an opinion, will they like me less, like my mother did when she didn't like my opinion when I was 14, And so there's a lot of difficulty when, also as we see that people pleasing coming in and that shyness and timidity, we also see people having a hard time with flexibility. I don't know if Belinda sees this in her practice, but whereby they're not really good with change. They have built up, I think, as children, this schema of what love is supposed to look like, what a relationship is supposed to look like, what the exchange between the dynamics of adult and non-adult, youth or a child looks like. So the schema is set in such a way that anything that seems strange or different, they're not really good at adapting, they're not very good at being flexible, and they're actually very suspicious of it. So sometimes when we finally get a partner who is wonderful, it's suspicious. Like, why are you being so loving? Like, why did you me? And then they put up that wall. The wall, instead of coming down and opening up the vulnerability, it's like, this is too good to be true. And don't get me wrong, and we'll talk about this maybe another day, there are certain personalities and the narcissist personalities that are very good at making you feel like it's too good to be true. But it's like, I always ask my clients, is this an insecurity or is this instinct? And sometimes, and we always say women should follow their gut, we have the best intuition, we know certain things. But what I've found is when persons tend to have some past trauma or some past hurt, or you develop insecurities, and then is that intuition, that gut feeling, a really true gut feeling, or is it your insecurities coming through?
Oh, good question.
Does that make sense?
That's a good question.
Right? Does that make sense? Of course, when we see persons who have difficulty regulating their emotions, they were not guided. And I always tell clients this: do not beat yourself up for not being able to regulate your emotions, because we were not taught how to regulate emotions. We were not taught how to identify emotions, awareness, or control them, or validate them. And so you've got all these emotions, and in Guyana, because we've normalized aggression, that becomes the number one response. I'm hurt, but I'm vexed, or I'm presenting as vexed. And I've taken clients with the emotional wheel, and I will sit down and say, well, tell me about that incident. And they'll be like, oh, and they go and they look at that section on sadness. And I'm like, it sounds like you were more sad, or you fall into the sadness category. But why were you acting aggressively? Why were you angry? Why were you shouting and screaming? They're like, I don't know. So they themselves don't want to be angry, furious people, and so emotional regulation. And we see this in relationships whereby one person, we just want to have a conversation so we could fix this problem, but the other person either shuts down because they don't like conflict, or they're intimidated by anything that seems like conflict, blocks it out, emotionally shuts down. I always tell my clients, don't freeze, flight, or fight, and I tell them you can flee emotionally as well. Wow, you can flee emotionally from a situation where you kind of shut down, and whether that's your coping mechanism or that's just how you learn how to argue. I get you. That also is something that was role modeled, right? And then Belinda said it quite well, lowered self-esteem and so on. Because how are you practicing, or how are you getting your validation if you can't regulate? You can't speak the way you'd like to speak. You're angry when you really want to convey that I'm hurt.
That's a bigger lesson. That's about teaching people about their self-worth. Teaching humans about their self-worth. Belinda, I want you to answer this question. I want you to take this. It's from Michelle Lewis. Some mothers, it's not a question, it's more of a statement. Some mothers have only one purpose. That was to bring you forth, and nothing beyond that. We have to decide if we want them in our lives the way that they are or not. We must protect our peace. Unfortunately, I had to cut mine off recently. I'm 46. I've tried to address the issues between us. However, she wasn't willing to do the work. Therefore, I couldn't allow her to cause trauma in my life any further. I love her, but we'll have to love her from afar. And Angela Barros had the same issue with hers. Yes. So that's more or less what you were talking about before.
Yes, absolutely. I'm definitely in agreement with that, Michelle, because sometimes, the reality is, in order to cope, you've got to accept and let go. And that can be very difficult because, who wants to think that they have to accept and let go of their mum? But like you said, you can still love her, but you might just have to love her from a distance, because sometimes we have to accept that some people actually won't change. And when I say it's not their fault, I mean, they're just like that. They just won't change. They don't see any fault. They don't see any issue. They just won't change. And we have to remember that people's words and actions come sometimes from a problematic personality. And therefore, if you're going to have to be dealing with that personality on a regular basis, but that personality is a problematic one, you've got to be honest with yourself and say, do you know what? I've got to accept this is how she is, and it's not good for me. And I say to people all the time, it's like any relationship, which is the same like with your mum. I say that it's not for me I can't control you. I can only control myself. So if what you're offering and you package it as love, whether it's in a relationship, romantic one or not, any relationship, if what you offer as love is like this and it doesn't work for me, I have the choice and I can make the decision to walk away from that. Because if you
Exactly.
just present your love, you present it to the table, you lay it out, this is your love, and if it's all prickly and it's painful and what have you, I then get to decide whether I'm staying and receiving that love or I'm going. So I think for Michelle, she decided within herself, do you know what? If that's what you're offering, mum, it doesn't work for me. And it's about being okay to say, this does not work for me. It might work for someone else, but it doesn't work for me. And I recognize that you are not going to change. So instead of me trying to control and change you, let me change myself. Let me remove myself from the situation. Let me control me, because I get to decide whether I want that love or I don't. And we get to decide that. And sometimes we think we must just accept it, just have it all, you know, but no, actually, it's more damaging to stay than accept and let go and leave.
Yeah, exactly.
With that. And if we're talking about that, about relationships in general and telling people if it's not working for them, then leave, which is sometimes harder in third world countries. Well, maybe it's hard everywhere right now because of the financial situation. But if it's not working for you, leave, because you could die emotionally and die physically, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
So,
I think just on that point quickly, Sherry Ann, can I just say that it's a good point, because sometimes what we don't acknowledge is that, like as you were saying, is if we grew up with a relationship that was fragmented with our parents, with our mum, we can be desperately seeking love and validation or attention in the wrong way, right? Because if we haven't received it from them, what we then do, like I said, is we then live out from a wound, right? So we live out with healing which is not resolved, where we feel unloved, abandoned, unworthy. And then what we do is we attract, then subconsciously, we start seeking out others with whom we get to play out that same familiar but toxic and painful survival pattern, if that makes sense. So it's almost like what you said with trauma. It's easy for a trauma survivor to still seek out traumatic situations or chaos almost, because that's what they know. So it's the same with the fragment relationship with the parent, with a mum. If you felt unloved and not validated and abandoned, sometimes as women, what we then go and do is actually seek out unconsciously, or subconsciously, I should say, relationships that mirror that same type of abandonment. We can go out with emotionally unavailable men, you know?
Right.
Yeah. True. That's
or women, because if we're talking about even the mother-son relationship, then whomever they pick as a partner can also be emotionally unavailable as well, just like their guardian.
Absolutely.
Okay, some comments to keep people involved. Jeanette Stewart says emotional silence is the best remedy at times in relationships. However, you have to know when to let it go. Hello, Mervyn Hendy. I think my whole family's in here. Felicia Benjamin, Marie Saunders, Mishbu. Hello. Another psychologist. I like the psychologist coming to watch the psychologist. Colleen Khan. All the families are in here, right? I think I recognize the Khan, right? Michelle Lewis says, indeed, many get stuck in a groove, repeating the same negative patterns. And that's the point that I wanted to bring up when we come to the last two bits that I've written down. Secrets and lies and narcissism. And people get upset when you say narcissism. One of my sisters says, well, everybody's got a bit of narcissism in them, but so you can't blame that. But there's narcissism and narcissism, isn't there?
Yes.
And some people are born, Belinda and Raza, take this question. There are many people who are narcissists. They have emotional emotion inabilities. That comes from my lessons that I do in emotional intelligence. They have issues. They're born with issues. They're complicated people, and they experiment on their children. They experiment on the children. well, first they experiment on the partners. That's how they got the children, and then the children come. And there's some people that will never ever be happy. They continue to gaslight. Do you guys know anything, and can you help people to understand the narcissism, and then secrets and lies, the secrets that are that people keep internalized?
I lost you a bit, Sherry Ann. Is Raza taking the question?
What's going on? Is it the internet? I'm gonna change. Stay there, don't disappear, right? I'm gonna change the internet feed. I don't know. It's Guyana business.
Might be
okay,
me.
can you
Just, I
hear me
think it's
all right,
just me.
Belinda? Yeah, are you all right, Belinda?
Go first if you want. I feel like we bounce well off of each other anyway.
Yeah, you keep talking, Sherry. I think it's me. I think you lot are.
Okay, we can hear you, Belinda.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about these two things which came up a lot, where there was a lot of secrets and lies that people keep, and then it comes out in the into the family relationship. Mothers who try to pretend or that they were married. Let me use that as an example, that they were married to the father. And then years later, you found out that he wasn't married, that he was married to somebody else. There was another family. And then basically this comes out. And in the mentoring that I'm doing at the moment, that's coming out quite a lot, especially now that I'm in the Caribbean, right? So I want to talk about that. How do you get over dealing with somebody else's past? Should you just mind your business and get on with your own life? Or is it something that you should tell them that, you know, you're not happy with their behavior? And then, of course, narcissists. Choose your topic.
Right. So it's very interesting that particular example you gave, because I have experience with someone who experienced something like that as well. And what I know for certain is that it creates a lot of mistrust. Like once you find out that this person that you identified as your father or whomever, or even mother, like you didn't know you were adopted, something like that, you know, or that you were your father's outside child, but your mother accepted you. That kind of weird dynamic as well happens often in the Caribbean. And so that can lead to a lot of mistrust and hurt, because why is it that you couldn't tell me these things, or why was I kept out of the loop, especially when you're like an adult now and you're like, okay, tell me, my father's not really my father, like just tell me, I can see it, I know it, you know. And I feel like that creates a lot of mistrust, and it starts to, especially if you find out at a later age, it kind of can shift that identity challenge, whereby it's like, I have identified as this man or woman's child my entire life. And now I find out that I'm not connected to any of them or either of them. And so then it starts to become, well, should I hold on to that relationship now? Especially if it wasn't a great relationship. And it's like, should I also hold on to maybe some of the things I picked up from them, or what I believed I was picking up from my parents? Or what I thought was maybe biological, and now we understand it was just the environment. So it can lead to a lot of confusion, a lot of hurt, a lot of mistrust, and it can really ruin a relationship. If you thought that you had a good relationship with this guardian, whether it's father, mother, it can really fracture it, because all of a sudden now, how do I trust you? How do I trust that anything you say going forward is the truth, or anything from the past? Then you start questioning a whole lot of other things. Is my sibling? You know, who is my real father? Who is my real mother? Why weren't they in my life? Why did you choose them? Why did you not stay to choose them, or whatever the case may be? It becomes very, like I said, I'm using the words hurtful, confusing, and overwhelming. Because now it's like everything, remember we talked about that schema? Everything you thought you understood about your life now is like,
it's not there. Whereas I believe in, Belinda, and coming to you next, the transparency. I think that parents should be transparent. There's nothing the children can do if your mother had a child when she was 16 and had to get married and, you know, all them sort of things. That's nothing to do with you. That's something that happened between them. So why can't you just say it as it is? Because really, in the end, it doesn't become an issue later on in that child's life because you lied. Belinda.
Yes.
What do you think? What is your take on that?
I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you. I think when it comes to children, I think as a parent, it's irresponsible of you to raise a child within your secrets and your lies. So ultimately, like you said, the truth brings a sense of liberty, brings a sense of freedom that lies can never bring. And I think what we miss is that children grow up into adults, and like as we're saying, their identity becomes an issue. And when your identity is an issue, you're just misplaced everywhere. You know, you don't have a sense of belonging. You don't have a sense of knowing who you are within one space to another. But also I'm thinking about when lies come out and secrets like that come out, you then get thrown into a process of grief that on some level, you don't even have a great understanding to process it. You know, like when you've got like sudden death, you know, there's no preparation, because now you're having to grieve all that you thought it was, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. And sometimes I think we don't recognize it. It's really hard to recover from that, because as we know with grief, it's not a linear process. Sometimes you think you're okay and sometimes you're just not okay. And even if you then move on and find out who your real biological parent is, even if you kind of think that, you know, there's a level of forgiveness, it changes and rocks your whole world as you know it. So you can be through this, you can be living, right, in this process of grief that is never ending. Because like you said, there's moments, you know, when there's little moments, you know, when someone gets ill and they might need some, I don't know, some medical treatment. You know what I mean? There's always these triggers, always these reminders. So let's just deal with it at the beginning and just tell the truth, so we can eliminate the fact that someone then can be going through this process every day of their life for the rest of their lives. Because I think what we don't understand sometimes is the decisions we make today, obviously, for our children, inform them of who they are in regards to their worth, in regards to their value, in regards to their standing in the world. They see the world, how they see themselves, how they see people. Like that's how we are anyway, normally, you know, going through life. But can you imagine now having to carry the weight of something like that? The weight of thinking you belong to one DNA and you don't? That isn't your DNA? And I think we just underestimate how, like what you were saying, Sherry, and sometimes these situations, as scary as they can be, let's address them as soon as possible, as early as possible, so that we're not setting up our children to be children and adults that fail in life because they're now dealing with situations and ways of being now that don't allow them to go through life with the freedom and the liberty they deserve to have. And when I say that, I mean, because we now then are dealing with limiting beliefs now. You know, there's loads of things that come into play with this. And like you said, we're going to find them in the therapy room, which is the best place for them, don't get me wrong. But I'm just saying some things can be avoidable. And then they're just lost on so many levels. And the mental torment, you know, that they will be going through on a daily basis, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, like someone said, mental anguish. And I'm glad you said it like that, Belinda, because indeed, and I think that was the word that I was missing, is the grief. It's a grieving process. You're grieving what you thought you knew to now understand maybe what I thought I knew was not accurate, or maybe not, or never was. And that's what I mean about the questioning. It becomes almost obsessive, because now you're like, everything becomes questionable after that. Trust me.
Absolutely.
So it's better to tell the truth and sit and explain to your children when possible.
When appropriate, age appropriate. I'm going back to this oversharing, right? Age appropriate. I'm not telling tell the 6-year-old your burdens, but like, yeah, 16-year-old, yeah, maybe 20-year-old, maybe, you know.
Saying that, Reza, you've got some people who've been adopted, right? And they do tell their children earlier on. So some conversations can be had, but you're right. Age appropriate. You're right.
Yeah,
I
like
like
trauma is just no whole off. But if you were adopted, and especially if something medical is coming up, yeah, okay, we need to have this discussion.
I think
Our
going
blood
back,
is not going to match, and I'm going to explain why our blood is not going to match.
yeah, because that child's not going to hate you because you told them the truth. Nicola says, my point is, why look for love when you're hurting from maternal trauma? In my experience with this, my relationship with my mom has improved because I changed the dynamics, and my life has been my life is the best it's ever been. So that's a good point that she's made there. Jan Hogan says, you think as a mom you're the same as all your children, but especially when you are especially when their age gap in siblings, your children may have been brought up by a different mother, because you know, if there's 6 years between this child and that child, you become a different person then.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I've got 4 children. I've got 4 children, and my 18-year-old tells my younger 2 all the time, the mum you've got is not the mum we had growing up.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Firstborns are the trial run.
oh
The last
yes,
one get away with everything.
oh yes. Oh,
Well,
absolutely.
Jen goes on to make the point that you may have been brought up by a different mother, maybe in terms of housing, money, or other, you know, other father, living in different areas, or etc. She said it took her a long time to realize this, both as a daughter and a mother myself. I've had to build a new and better adult relationship with my eldest daughter, as my girls have a big age gap. Because, and that point is so valid, because I think there's only 3 years or 4 years between my first son and second son, but I think I'm sure I was a child when I had a child. I was only 20 when I had my first son, and I still think that's a child. And so basically I'm bringing him up in the way that I was brought up, or my expectations. But by the time 5 years later, I've done 2 jobs or 3 jobs. I've done all these different things, and I've grown. So
absolutely.
I wouldn't be harsh on my second one.
And you do evolve with that, don't you? Because my oldest, I said my 18-year-old, but my oldest is actually, my son is 23. And who I was for him, and then had my 18-year-old, the girl who came afterwards, I just was in a different place. Like you said, I've studied, I've experienced life a little bit more better. My relationships with personal romantic relationships were different. There's so much factors that play into who you are as a mum. So as you change and evolve, your parenting changes.
And I would even say, when you have, like how Belinda has like 4 kids at varying ages, I think even in the span of one day, you need to be different versions of yourself, because you're not going to talk to the 23-year-old the way you're going to talk to like the 10-year-old.
100%.
You know?
Yes.
And so even within the span of one day,
yes,
you are going to demonstrate variations of the concept of motherhood.
Because they're different as children. You're right, because they're different as children. And when you adapt to that, even that, sometimes you find I'm a little bit more firmer with one character, bless her,
right,
compared to the other one.
Poor child. We send a therapist for you. We've got lots of people that join this Zoom. Gillian Beresford Bernard, Kevin Marino, Mattia. Oh, he's so funny on Facebook. He really is. Amanda Douglas, thank you for joining us. So what I'm going to do for the next, because these two have got such great energy and lots of questions, what I'm going to do for the next session, it won't be next week, it'll be next month, okay? In March. Women's Month. We're going to talk about things like this. I think that we need to be so open as women and talk about issues that, although it's women talking to women, of course, men, you're invited. Please bring a friend and come along and let's talk about issues, relationships, sex, things like that seems to cause such big problems. You know, I've got people in here talking about my son. Nicola says my son is approaching his 30th, and because of my parents' lack, I ensure that he has been made aware of truth and love. Both are important to raising children. You know, so for the next session, I'm going to be sending targets to you guys. I'm going to block you if you don't come on, especially Angela Barros, who I know she will come on. And Nicola, I want you to come on. Roxana, I want you to come on. In fact, all of you that come on here every week. Michelle Lewis, I want you to come in. Let's have a Zoom room full of people who have, if you don't have a problem, because you might not want people to know it's your problem, but you know, we know. But you can talk about a subject. We'll talk about a subject and we'll discuss it. I want this year to be no bars holds. Come on, let's talk about it. Do the practitioners have social media platform that we can follow them on, please? Thank you. Yes, both of them will come in, and in the comment section they'll put all their details. If you want to say it now, you can, and also put it in there. So Belinda, what's yours?
Mine is the Yakira Center. So it's and Yakira is YAKIRA Center. So that's on Instagram and Twitter, and there's a website. But I'll put it in the chat as well.
But she'll put it in the chat. Liza?
And mine is Anira Counseling and Psychological Services. So ANIRA Counseling and Psychological Services. And that is solely on Facebook. Yeah.
Okay. Well, this was another good show. It's exactly an hour. I like to keep it on an hour because I've been trained by one woman called Dancy, who tells me off when I'm over an hour. Well, not tells me off, she's a friend. So she just says, remember, keep it to an hour, keep it to an hour. It's such a laugh. But I'd like to thank both of you for these, especially these 2 weeks. We can't answer all that's listening. We can't tackle all the subjects in one day. You just can't. So I want it to be once a month at least, where we come in and we invite people to come into the room. Sharon Bollas, it's so nice to see you in here. And maybe you can join us next month as well. I will put the date out where we talk about all things that affect us. You know, I don't want to talk about politics. I want to talk about self and issues with self. So thank you so much to Riza and Belinda, and to all of you who come on this show every week. And let's keep on talking, all right?
Yes,
All right.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Sherry. Thanks, Belinda.
And you as well, will link up soon. Thank you, guys.
And happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's, ladies. Hugs and kisses.
Red lips on.
Take my lipstick.
So for those of you
lockdown,
you know, in lockdown, for the British in the lockdown, I feel sorry for you all, and all the men that are in the room who have more than one woman. Sorry, I have to go there. More than one woman.
You going there?
What is your excuse for today? You're locked down with one. Hey, locked down with one. So how do you get to the other one? Because we're right? In England, unless they're away, don't they, Belinda? Bubbles. You can go see your friend.
Yes, you've got bubbles. Absolutely. People got bubbles. And let's be honest, men they find a way.
Either way. You see my friend Julian going, Sherry, behave yourself. I just can't through, right? And Shirley McGreal, publisher, she knows me and she's always supportive. Thank you very much for coming in this week. I have to behave badly. I'm sitting here and I can see on the men's platforms, I'm going into their threads and they're saying, man shortage today, man shortage. Yes. There is. Anyway, I have a good one. Give yourself chocolate wine and play some good music. Right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Bye.